The Vietnam War was a brutal conflict. It left an indelible mark on history. A staggering statistic reveals the war's devastating toll. Over 58,000 American soldiers lost their lives. Millions of Vietnamese, both combatants and civilians, perished. The war's impact extended far beyond the battlefield, leaving deep scars on both nations. The Vietnam War was a complex and protracted struggle. It was fought between communist North Vietnam and the government of South Vietnam. The United States, deeply entrenched in the Cold War, intervened heavily in support of South Vietnam. The war became a proxy conflict, reflecting the broader ideological battle between communism and democracy that defined the era. The war's duration was another shocking aspect. It spanned nearly 2 decades, from 1955 to 1975. The United States' involvement alone lasted for 10 long years, from 1965 to 1975. The protracted nature of the conflict tested the limits of American resolve and ignited fierce debates on the home front. Vietnam, a nation in Southeast Asia, boasts a rich history and culture. However, the 20th century brought turmoil and division. Following World War II, Vietnam, previously under French colonial rule, sought independence. This led to the First Indochina War, 1946 to 1954. Where Vietnamese forces, led by Ho Chi Minh, fought against French domination. The Geneva Accords of 1954 temporarily divided Vietnam into North and South along the 17th parallel. Ho Chi Minh's communist forces controlled the North, while the South, supported by the United States, aimed to prevent the spread of communism. This division sowed the seeds of the Second Indochina War, more commonly known as the Vietnam War. The war in Vietnam was not merely a conventional conflict. It was characterized by guerrilla warfare, with the Viet Cong, the communist guerrilla forces in the south, employing hit-and-run tactics and utilizing the dense jungle terrain to their advantage. The United States, accustomed to traditional warfare, faced significant challenges in combating this elusive enemy. The Vietnam War presented a unique set of challenges for the American military. The dense jungles of Vietnam became both a battlefield and a hiding place for the enemy. The Viet Cong, masters of guerrilla warfare, employed stealth and surprise to great effect. American soldiers trained for conventional warfare struggled to adapt to this unconventional enemy. The Viet Cong's knowledge of the terrain, combined with their ability to blend in with the local population, made them a formidable adversary. Booby traps, ambushes, and tunnel systems were just some of the tactics used against American and South Vietnamese forces. The use of Agent Orange, a powerful herbicide by the US military, further complicated the conflict. While intended to defoliate the jungle and expose enemy hiding places, Agent Orange had devastating and long-lasting effects on the environment and human health. Its use remains a controversial aspect of the war. The Vietnam War was not just a military conflict, it was also a battle for hearts and minds. The Viet Cong's propaganda efforts were highly effective in winning support from the local population, further complicating the situation for American and South Vietnamese forces. The Gulf of Tonkin incident in August 1964 marked a turning point in the Vietnam War. The incident, involving alleged attacks on US Navy destroyers by North Vietnamese torpedo boats, led to the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. This resolution granted President Lyndon B. Johnson the authority to escalate American military involvement in Vietnam. The Tet Offensive, launched by the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese Army in January 1968, shook the American public's confidence in the war effort. The offensive, though militarily a failure for the communists, exposed the limitations of American military power and undermined the perception that victory was in sight. The Tet Offensive had a profound impact on American public opinion. It fueled anti-war sentiment and led to increased calls for a negotiated settlement. The images of the fighting, broadcast into American homes, brought the brutality of war into sharp focus. Despite the heavy casualties inflicted on the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese Army, the Tet Offensive marked a turning point in the war. It shattered the illusion of American progress and raised serious doubts about the viability of a military victory. The Paris Peace Accords, signed in January 1973, marked the beginning of the end of the Vietnam War. The accords called for a ceasefire, the withdrawal of American troops, and a political settlement between North and South Vietnam. However, the accords proved to be fragile. On April 30th, 1975, North Vietnamese forces captured Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam. The fall of Saigon marked the end of the war and the reunification of Vietnam under communist rule. The event was a symbolic defeat for the United States and its allies. The legacy of the Vietnam War is complex and multifaceted. For the United States, it was a costly and divisive conflict that left deep scars on American society. The war's impact on American foreign policy was profound, leading to a period of introspection and a reluctance to engage in foreign interventions. For Vietnam, the war was a long and painful struggle for independence and reunification. The country faced the daunting task of rebuilding after decades of conflict and overcoming the divisions of the past. The legacy of the war continues to shape Vietnam's domestic and foreign policies. The Vietnam War left an enduring legacy on American society, impacting everything from politics and foreign policy to culture and social norms. The war divided the nation, sparking protests and igniting debates about the role of America in the world. One of the most significant impacts of the war was the erosion of trust in the government. The credibility gap, fueled by perceived government deception about the war's progress, left many Americans disillusioned and skeptical of official narratives. The war also had a profound impact on the men and women who served in Vietnam. Many veterans returned home physically wounded or suffering from psychological trauma, including post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. The nation struggled to address the needs of these veterans, and many faced challenges reintegrating into civilian life. The anti-war movement, which gained momentum during the Vietnam War, had a lasting impact on American society. It highlighted the power of dissent and the importance of civic engagement. The movement's legacy can be seen in subsequent protests and social movements. The Vietnam War era was a time of significant social and political upheaval in the United States. The war divided Americans along generational, ideological, and racial lines. Mass protests and demonstrations against the war became a common sight in cities across the country. College campuses became hotbeds of anti-war activism, with students organizing teach-ins, marches, and demonstrations. The draft, which conscripted young men to fight in Vietnam, was a particularly contentious issue, leading to widespread resistance and draft dodging. The anti-war movement was diverse, encompassing students, civil rights activists, religious groups, and ordinary citizens who opposed the war on moral, ethical, or political grounds. The movement's tactics ranged from peaceful protests and civil disobedience to more radical actions. The Vietnam War and the anti-war movement had a profound impact on American politics. It contributed to the decline of the Democratic Party's dominance, the rise of the New Left, and the growing polarization of American society. The war's legacy continues to shape political discourse and debate to this day. Section 8. The media's lens, shaping public perception of the war. The Vietnam War was the first televised war, and the media played a significant role in shaping public perception of the conflict. Images of the fighting, broadcast into American homes on the nightly news, brought the brutality of war into sharp focus. The media's coverage of the war was not without controversy. Some accused the media of having a liberal bias and of undermining the war effort by focusing on negative aspects of the war, such as civilian casualties and American setbacks. Despite the accusations of bias, the media played a crucial role in informing the public about the realities of the war. The images and stories disseminated by journalists helped to galvanize the anti-war movement and turn public opinion against the war. The Vietnam War marked a turning point in the relationship between the government and the media. It highlighted the power of the media to influence public opinion and the importance of a free and independent press in a democratic society. Section 9. Key figures: leaders, soldiers, and activists. The Vietnam War was populated by a cast of complex and influential figures, each playing a pivotal role in shaping the course of the conflict. From political leaders and military commanders to ordinary soldiers and anti-war activists, these individuals left an indelible mark on history. President Lyndon B. Johnson, who escalated American involvement in Vietnam, grappled with the war's complexities and the growing dissent on the home front. His legacy remains intertwined with the war's controversial legacy. General William Westmoreland, the commander of U.S. forces in Vietnam, faced criticism for his handling of the war and his pursuit of a military victory. Robert McNamara, the U.S. Secretary of Defense during the war's early years, later expressed regret for his role in escalating the conflict. His memoir, In Retrospect, The Tragedy and Lessons of Vietnam, offered a candid and critical assessment of the war's prosecution. Ho Chi Minh, the communist leader of North Vietnam, was a revered figure who inspired his people to fight for independence and reunification. His determination and resilience proved instrumental in the North Vietnamese victory. Section 10, the Vietnam Syndrome, a turning point in foreign policy. The Vietnam War had a profound and lasting impact on American foreign policy, leading to what became known as the Vietnam Syndrome. The term referred to the American public's aversion to foreign interventions, particularly in conflicts perceived as unwinnable or involving a significant risk of American casualties. The Vietnam Syndrome influenced American foreign policy for decades, leading to a period of retrenchment and a reluctance to commit American troops to overseas conflicts. The Carter administration's emphasis on human rights and its cautious approach to foreign interventions reflected this shift in thinking. The Reagan administration, while seeking to reassert American global leadership, remained mindful of the lessons of Vietnam. The Reagan Doctrine, which supported anti-communist movements worldwide, relied primarily on covert action and support for proxy forces rather than direct military intervention. The Vietnam Syndrome, while often cited as a factor in American foreign policy decisions, was not an absolute constraint. The United States continued to engage in military interventions, albeit more selectively and with greater attention to public opinion and congressional approval. Section 11, Echoes of Vietnam, Lessons Learned and the Path Forward. The Vietnam War continues to resonate in American consciousness, serving as a cautionary tale and a reminder of the complexities of foreign interventions. The war's legacy offers valuable lessons for policymakers and citizens alike. One of the key lessons of Vietnam is the importance of clear objectives and a well-defined exit strategy. The United States' gradual escalation of involvement in Vietnam without a clear vision for victory or a plan for withdrawal contributed to the war's protracted nature and ultimate failure. Another crucial lesson is the need for public support and congressional authorization for military interventions. The Vietnam War demonstrated the limits of executive power and the importance of democratic accountability in matters of war and peace. The Vietnam War also highlighted the moral and ethical dilemmas of warfare. The use of Agent Orange, the My Lai massacre, and other atrocities committed during the war raised profound questions about the conduct of war and the importance of adhering to international law and human rights standards.